What's up, everybody? Chester ARP Church Devotional Podcast. Thanks for being with us. We'll get started in just a moment.
Cheers each winding path I tread.
All right. Well, we are picking up the Bible story in 1 Kings this morning. 1 Kings chapter 11. And as we do that, we will study the fact that Solomon has turned from the Lord. In fact, the beginning of 1 Kings chapter 11 tells us that Solomon's heart was taken by the women in his lives, the women in his life, the wives that he had brought in from the nations, 700 wives and 300 concubines. And his wives turned his heart away from the Lord, and he began to follow after the gods of these women. He is not blaming the women. The Bible does not blame the women here. This is strictly Solomon's responsibility, strictly Solomon's choice to follow after their gods. It just means that they were faithful to their own gods, and Solomon did a bad thing by bringing them into the relationship with God's people. And so as he did that, then they brought their gods with them. And Solomon began to embrace the gods of the other nations. They didn't force Solomon. The women aren't being blamed for Solomon's failure. Solomon is fully responsible for his own turning away from the Lord. And as a result of that, the Lord is angry with Solomon. Verse 9 of chapter 11 says this, "And the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice, and commanded him concerning this thing that he should not go after the other gods, but did not keep what the Lord commanded. Therefore the Lord said to Solomon, Since this has been your practice, and you have not kept my covenant and my statutes that I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you and will give it to your servant. Yet for the sake of David your father, I will not do it in your days, but I will tear it out of the hand of your son. However, I will not tear all the kingdom away, but I will give one tribe to your son for the sake of David my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem that I have chosen." Now God comes to Solomon and says, "I'm angry with you." Now it's interesting here, verse 10 says that Solomon had received a word from God twice. And the Lord had said to Solomon twice, he'd come to him directly twice, and said, "Stop going after these other women. Don't do this." And Solomon rejected the Lord's wisdom, rejected the Lord's command, and decided that his heart was going to go after the gods of the women in his life, and he was going to pursue those gods, and he was going to go worship those gods and worship the gods and the deities of the nations. 700 wives, 300 concubines. Again, they're not responsible for Solomon's sin. Solomon himself is responsible for his sin. God has specifically warned Solomon twice, directly. It's interesting when I think about that, because I think about how often I've been warned, and maybe this is true in your life as well, been warned through the scriptures. Certain sins are sins. Idolatry, immorality, different things that we have going on in our lives. And so we know that those things that we are doing are specific sins. And God has said they are specific sins, and God has said don't do them. Don't go in that direction. You're my child. I want you to follow after me. I want your heart to be directed toward me. Don't do those things. And yet we've rejected the word of the Lord. Solomon had direct, in some ways we could say our sin is probably more grievous because we have God's word and the testimony of his Spirit inside us. But in some ways we could say, would say, well, if we had a direct encounter with the living God, we wouldn't be tempted. We wouldn't fall in that sin. That's not true. Solomon had a direct encounter with the Lord twice. And each time God said, don't do that. And yet Solomon refused. And as a result of that, he had to suffer the consequences of his sin, turning away from the Lord. The kingdom was going to be ripped from him. Not during his lifetime, because God was going to be faithful to David, but afterwards he was going to take it from his son. And we know the kingdom of God was ultimately divided. It was divided between his two sons, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. One of them went with Rehoboam, and the other one went with Jeroboam. The Rehoboam went in the south, Jeroboam to the north. And those two nations, those two groups of tribes became utter enemies with one another. And they had a fate where they followed after their father Solomon, eventually by turning away from the Lord and suffering the consequences for their own actions. And so what we find here is that Solomon's responsible. God is just in bringing the consequence of the sin upon Solomon. But the interesting thing about Solomon, and really quite striking is that when we get to the end of chapter 11, I didn't read it all, but we get to the end of chapter 11, we don't really know whether Solomon repented. We don't know anything else about Solomon. God says, you're going to have the kingdom stripped from you. You've wandered away. Your heart has gone after other gods. It seems to me that's language that says he's turned away from the Lord. To use it in modern language, he would deconstruct the faith. And we're not told whether he came back, if he repented at the end of his life, if he returned in sorrow and bring himself before the presence of God. And I think that's intentional. Obviously, it's intentional because God has his word, and it is always intentional what he records for us. But I think it's intentional in that it causes us to ask a very hard question of ourselves. Are we willing to repent and rely upon the Lord and trust the Lord? Solomon is a tale that is a warning to us, because we can be those who walk in wisdom, we can be those who walk with the Lord, and yet at the same time we can turn away from him and chase after the gods of this world and the idols of the world and turn away from him, and our hearts be hardened against him, and we must suffer the consequences. And does Solomon suffer them eternally? I don't know. You don't know. But I know this about myself. I know my tendency is to struggle like Solomon's, but the call on my life is to repent and turn back to the Lord so I don't have to suffer those consequences eternally, because Christ has given his life for me. And he's done the same for you. And so I think it's a challenge to us. Solomon is a cautionary tale toward us. God raised up enemies from the outside, Edom, and also from the outside in Damascus, what would later become Syria. And then he raised up enemies from within as well, as those would attack. So Solomon was being attacked on the outside and from within. And his last days were tumultuous, all because he refused to repent and refused to walk with the Lord and chased after the gods of the world. So much trouble in our life comes from our lack of repentance, our hard-heartedness, our failure to submit to the Lord. And as a result of that, we bring calamity upon us. And we don't have to. We can live in grace and the truth if we would simply choose to walk with him. You guys have a great day. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Trust the Lord.
Your goodness and mercy will follow.